Hello and welcome to the Men's Lifeline Academy. We bring on Southern men who are out there helping other men and other people grow and reaching their max capacity and capabilities. And today I got Jeff Callahan, the author of Confidence Maxing. We have another author on this podcast, and I'm so glad to have him, meet him, and discuss his book, his life story, and how we can further support him. So, Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how's it going? I'm excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to hear you because I always love it when we have someone who has written a book, who's out there really doing the work, helping people max out on their life, especially when we talk about developing confidence. So why don't we start off with like a little bit about you and like who's Jeff Callahan?
Yeah, so I'm Jeff Callahan. I'm the founder of Become More Compelling, which is a company I started back in 2014 with the goal of helping people become more socially confident. And then over the last call it year and a half, I've wrote this book called Confidence Maxing, and the main goal there is to put basic to kind of clone myself, right? To put everything I know into book form so that the most the most amount of people on Earth can benefit from certain things that I've learned over the last 20 years when it comes to building social confidence.
That's awesome. I think that's something that's actually so important, especially in the world of AI now, which people are now
100%.
using AI to how to have a conversation, how to get a date, what to
Yeah.
say in this response.
Yeah, and you actually bring up a really good point, which is I talk about it a little bit in the introduction of the book, where I talk about what I call the war on human connection,
Mm.
and there are several components that fold into it, but one of the components is people that use or AI chatbots that are what I call friendship as a service, where uh, it's like this like the Terminator, like with Terminator style efficiency, AI is for some people trying to replace the concept of friendship,
Ah,
which I think it's a brave new world. I on X, I've jokingly referred to myself as the John Connor of the war on human connection because I'm trying to stop the future where we're all just kind of in the pods talking to our AI companions.
my gosh, it's so true that some people are now like having like developing like an AI bot that they can date or talk to that's being their friend. So as John Connor, how are you taking the war back, taking that power back to have more of that human connection? Because I was just talking to a guy the other day who's now trying to teach people how to flirt and really trying to even connect with people. And it's so astounding that we're actually at that point now of even
Yeah.
having a conversation of how do we even have a conversation?
Yeah, I it, it's a fascinating thing because I started Become More Compelling in 2014. It's been a while. Maybe only now am I actually we're actually entering the phase in humanity where I'm most needed.
Mhm.
So I was just extremely early. And if you it's interesting because when you look at kind of the trajectory of especially Western culture and American culture from say the 1950s to now, what you see is, take pre pre-suburban expansion. People were in neighborhoods, in cities, and or communities, and they knew each other, and they, uh, you know, obviously there was no phone. There was like you could read a newspaper and you could check out, but that's only in the morning, right? Uh, since the 1950s, you have suburban expansion where neighborhoods popped up and people became more just geographically spread out. The car became the mainstay of like, hey, you want to go do something? Well, you gotta you gotta have a car. Mixed neighborhood and zoning was a little different too. So you're gonna have less just the corner hangout spot. So over the last 50, 60, 70 years, third spaces have really dried up quite a bit. Now there's other things that layer on top of that. Uh, we could talk about deinstitutionalization, crime permissiveness, but in 2007, when Steve Jobs walked on stage and he held up the very first iPhone, little did we all know what was coming down the pipe in terms of what I call algorithmic vampires, where we are, in some ways, when you think of all the media that we consume and everything, life has gotten a lot more compartmentalized where you could have the option to just stay in your house, get delivery, never leave, never interact with anyone. And the reality is, like, you're going to have a much more full and much more enjoyable life if you, for instance, know your neighbors, uh, interact with people socially, get out in your community, meet people. Like, that's the solution, in my opinion. The solution to 80% of life's problems is simply meet more people. And so that's the crusade that I'm on.
Well, I think it's a very noble crusade of really developing that human connection again and teaching people how to get out and not be in your house all day. We can have food delivered to you, and especially when you're talking about Uber Eats or DoorDash or um, different grocery stores that can now do their own delivery services. So the need of actually going out is even lessened.
Yeah, 100%. And what you have to do to fight back against that is, what I talk about in the book is something I call IRL maxing. And the key concept is you need to be finding places that fit the three categories, the big three I call them. Number one, you enjoy the activity. Could be pickleball, could be something else. You have to enjoy it, otherwise you're not going to go. So it has to fit that. It has to meet regularly, so it can't meet sporadically, because you have to develop some sort of social history, and it has to have regulars, so people have to go there regularly. So if
Mm.
it fits those three categories, then you're set up for success when it comes to, like, I can show up to something that I like. Could be a fitness class or whatever it happens to be. I show up to something I like, I see people there regularly, and then I develop a history with them. Uh, could be every week, could be every couple weeks. You could stack four different events over a month, for example. Could be something like that. And that sets you up for all the other stuff that you'll learn in the book, which is kind of the nuts and bolts of how to dial in your mental operating system, how to have a good conversation, how to start conversations, how to enter conversations with the right energy level, all those sort of more tactical things that are crucial. Um, you have to have opportunities to practice, because you could learn all the skills you want, but if you don't actually have the at bats, I'm a baseball fan. If you don't have those at bats, guess what? You're just not going to improve, or you're going to improve way slower than you need to, because we need some sort of speed of improvement to see that we are winning, to feel like we are capable, that creates a virtuous cycle to make us want to keep trying, keep improving, keep winning.
Yeah. So, I mean, for such a noble cause, what was the catalyst for you embarking on this journey in 2014?
Yeah. So my sort of backstory is that all the way from elementary school, middle school, junior high, high school, even a little bit in college, I had a speech impediment so bad I couldn't say my own name. And that made connecting with other people, as you might imagine, a little bit more difficult than it needed to be. Right. And that was a big struggle in my early life. And at a certain point, I was like, you know what? I write about in the book just a touch where I remember I went to school for journalism, and I was in my mass comm and society class, and we would meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I sat right next to this girl, and I wanted to start a conversation with her. When I say sat right next to, like, we shared a table. We were like 8 inches apart for an entire semester. And I thought, oh man, if I could only every Tuesday, Thursday in the afternoon, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to start a conversation today. I'm going to start a conversation today. The pressure mounted and mounted and mounted. And guess what? I never started a conversation with her. Now, please don't cry for me. I'm about to celebrate my 12th anniversary with my wife. And, thank goodness I didn't start a conversation with that woman in college, because who knows how my life would have turned out. But the reality is that for my clients and me in a past life, I wanted the optionality to dial up how social I wanted to be in any given situation, so that you have the option. It doesn't mean that you don't have to always be social, but you always want the option. You always want the option to say, "Hey, I'd like to start a conversation. I'd like to talk to this person or that person," because you never know where that's going to lead you in life. What I always tell my clients is simply that you can't predict when there's going to be a conversation, which is like the most important conversation of your life. You have no clue when that's going to be, but you want to develop the skills so that you are ready when the time comes.
Correct. Well, that's an incredible story that you were able to overcome a speech impediment into now speaking on this podcast. And I mean, you had to ask your wife out eventually.
Yeah, we met in the pre-app days of online dating. So back when you had to send a long message to your betrothed, right? And you actually had to like schedule and meet up and all that kind of stuff. And so, uh, but by that point in 2014, I had already put myself in a lot of situations where I knew I kind of had to sink or swim to improve, and I had largely gotten rid of the speech impediment and felt a lot more self confident instead of self conscious.
Oh, that's a huge difference right there, self-conscious versus confident.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is generally pretty true is that the more self-focused we have, you could call that self-consciousness, as the inverse of self-confident. The more we look internally to ourself, and are kind of overly introspective, and especially socially, where, like, I'll give you an example. If you're at a party and you're talking to someone and you're wondering in your head and you're giving yourself a report card of, hey, I wonder how I'm doing in this conversation. Guess what? You're never going to give yourself a good grade. No one is internally focused and thinking to themselves, how am I doing? And sort of measuring their own performance. They're not doing that to themselves to give themselves a pat on the back. They're doing that to themselves because they're going to find something to be critical about. And that impacts your performance, makes you second guess yourself, makes you overthink, and ultimately, I think negatively impacts the conversation that you're in because you're just not you're in your head, you're not in the room. So if you
That's
uh,
true.
invert that and think, hey, well, if I can be more externally focused, focused on the other person or the party or whatever it happens to be, you're going to have a lot better time because you're not so focused on what does everything mean about me. There's a certain egotism to that too, where you're just thinking like everything,
It's about
everything must mean something about me. It's like, here's the thing, most things don't mean anything about you. And that's actually fantastic news because that frees you up because you're not trying to grab onto something that you never had in the first place.
So how do you help people reduce that mind chatter, that self-evaluation in their head of, well, how am I doing? Am I saying the right things? Am I doing the right things? And a lot of that social anxiety that could just like come up, and especially when you're being
Yeah.
critical of yourself.
Yeah. So the very first part of the book, and it's the first thing I talk about with my clients, is you have to get your mental operating system dialed in. What does that mean? Well, most people walk around very similarly to giving yourself a report card. They are constantly scanning their own performance for signals that they are incompetent. And they're like, oh, this joke I told that didn't land, or this story I told that I, forgot the middle of it, or whatever it happens to be. They're constantly scanning for proof of their incompetence. Now, I don't know about you, but think about any skill that you have. Imagine spending 5 or 10 minutes before trying to do that thing if you thought about all the times when you were incompetent at it. Would you be able to perform? Probably not. And so the very first step is you have to show your mind frequent proof of your own competence. And over time, you will believe the proof. Now, I've coached over 100 clients over the years, and I have yet to find a single person who didn't have anything positive going on that they could mark down as even a small social win. It just hasn't happened. And so I'm a firm believer everyone has something. Uh, and so you have to document those small instances of proof. You have to document them, write them down, notebook, notes app on your phone, whatever works. And then you have to review those social wins, showing yourself frequent proof of your own competence. And as you learn the skills, yes, you're going to go on to bigger and better wins, of course. But you have to sort of be really persistent about showing yourself frequent pieces of evidence that you are competent. Could be I smiled at someone. Could be I started a conversation. Could be I made a joke. Could be I just like left my house and did something out in the world that I wouldn't have normally done, right? And so that's square one. You have to do that part of it before you do anything else, in my opinion.
So it's kind of going back to your journalism expertise. It's always finding the facts, finding the information of where the proof is. And one thing that you really hit on is review. I really like
Yeah.
that you mentioned that because how often do people they'll track their wins, of course. The next question that I don't really hear about, which is how much time do you actually take to then review every single time you won, or you're always reflecting on that you tried and that's it.
Yeah. I think if you're only documenting and you're not reviewing, that's only half the battle. And it's very easy to just like, oh yeah, I had this win or had that win, and then like the next day you're just like you can't remember it, right? And
Exactly.
so I tell people you can do it a couple ways. One is every week, pick the right time for you. It might be Monday morning before you're getting your workday started. It might be Sunday night. Could be something like that. You're reviewing wins from the previous week. Um, the as needed part is say that you're going into, for example, like a Monday morning stand up meeting that has always got you a little nervous because you have to talk every single time. Well, if you can pick out a couple of times in the past when you have done well, uh, you can boot up your brain right before that meeting and say, well, I'm probably going to look at some uh, past times when I was confident at the situation that I'm about to be in.
Mhm.
Uh, and that really helps because then it's very hard for your what I call your inner jerk to get a foothold and whisper feelings of incompetence if you're like, no, look at this proof right here. uh, it was fine. I survived last time. I even did a couple of good things.
Mhm.
Um, then it's very hard for you to counteract that because then you've exited the place of I feel and you're entering a place of I know because look at this.
Definitely have the expertise. They've been doing this for 12 years and really have, I'm sure helped a lot of people, especially if we were able to help 100, people developing more confidence and reducing that talk and really taking time to actually look at the evidence
Hmm.
versus just having that feeling of, well, I think I feel incompetent. Well, a lot of times you might feel incompetent until you actually see yourself and how many times people said, wow, that was like the greatest speech ever. That was like the most impactful thing you said. And you hit on all the problems and all the points. And then I'm sure the next time I'm like, did I?
Yeah, it's really easy to it's really easy to have a mostly good social interaction, but there might be a little sliver of it that is opportun. I'll call it opportunistic. I won't even call it negative. It just might be something that you might tweak or improve for next time.
Mhm.
Uh, and as part of the documentation process, it's probably the number one objection I hear from new clients is simply, "Oh, I didn't write that down because it wasn't big enough." Well,
So now there's
here's the
that right.
thing:
Ah,
write it down because you have to stack small wins, especially early on. Uh, I think it's just a feature of being human. There's some good research done by this guy named Rick Hansen out of uh, UC Berkeley, and he's done a lot of stuff around the negativity bias. And he has a quote that I like, which is positive experiences. They're like Teflon, where they just kind of slide right off. Negative experiences like Velcro, where it's really sticky. And so you have to like in my opinion, you have to work twice or three times as hard to capture those positive experiences and resist the temptation to uh look at that little like 5% sliver that maybe could go better. I mean, I think that's true in every interaction. There's no such thing as a perfect interaction.
exactly.
And wad up that entire experience and throw it in the failure bucket. Well, that would be a failure by itself. It's much better to say, hey, I'm improving. Is there stuff that I could do better? Of course, that's always going to be true. But I really want to keep putting myself in situations that gently push my comfort zone so that I can continue getting wins and I can continue to feel like I'm in a winning state.
And I like how you said that negativity is like Velcro, it's just so stuck on it that you have to really pull it to get it out.
Hmm.
That's a
Yeah.
fantastic analogy to really be able to define it as such.
Yeah. And what I say in the book, and I think this is true, like your negativity bias and your aversion to having negative things happen to you. It's a mechanism to keep you safe. So it's kind of the thing that also tells you not to walk down dark alleys at 2:30 in the morning. So it serves a purpose. It is a good thing. It's just it pops up in meetings or in meetup events or fitness classes, all the stuff that you're probably not in any mortal danger, right? Most likely. Uh and so it's not useful in those situations. It's not helpful in those situations. I tend to divide things a lot of times in terms of, is it helpful? Is it not helpful? And there's plenty of stuff that we kind of do by default that is just not helpful. And so it impacts our performance. It impacts our ability to improve
Wow. So you got a lot of work on your hands.
just a little bit.
Oh, I mean, but that's so true though, because how often the mind is attracted to the negativity to just affirm, and that negative feedback loop of all the negative experiences and replaying in your head over and over again.
Yeah. And a couple of interesting points that we could go in. There's something I teach called choose your own reality, which I think is right in line with this. That I think would be interesting. Is
What's that?
so most situations are pretty ambiguous. Like there's some situations that are clearly positive, like you did great on that presentation, great job, or I'm having a great conversation, or I really enjoy hanging out with you. Clearly positive. Some situations are clearly negative. We want to obviously minimize those. But there's a lot of situations that might fit in sort of an ambiguous, call it 80% in the middle. The example I always use with this, that I think is pretty good, is you text someone and they don't text back.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like perfect because there's just very little input, so you can make up whatever story you want in your head. Um, with choose your own reality, like the default explanation might be, oh, did I say something like did did they not like this text message? Do they not like me? Like there's so many inputs that are usually negative because our mind is trying to explain this situation to us. It's creating a fiction, right? um, an unhelpful fiction, I would add. Much better play is to find a more neutral explanation of that event. Like, oh, they're probably just busy, you know, and they'll get back to me when they can. Now, that's also a fiction. It's probably equally as true as the negative version of the story. Um, but only one of those is helpful. The other one is not helpful. And so I would choose to live in the more helpful fictional fictional reality, because the reality is maybe they end up closing the loop and they tell you like, oh, I'm sorry, my dog got hit by a truck or whatever. They were at the emergency vet. Sometimes the loop closes and we do figure out what was actually going on, but it's really important if you're dealing with any sort of ambiguous situation, asking yourself like, okay, well, I'm gonna create a fiction no matter what, because your mind is a narrative machine. I
Hmm.
might as well have a at least a neutral explanation. I think that explanation could even skew a little positive. The only caveat is we don't want to have too uh thick of rose colored glasses, because that might cause problems on its own. But most people's default is walking around using negative explanations of events, and I know one thing that is for sure unhelpful.
I mean, you just unloaded like a whole into the Matrix, into the Terminator, the whole thing that people do try to predict what's going to happen. I think you hit on a really good point, actually. That when you're doing the texting and everything, especially now with phones, you can see if they read it. And working
Yep.
with a lot of people, they would say, "Well, I saw they read it. How come they didn't respond? Like, what's their problem? Or did I do something?" Or you see
Hmm.
the dot 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 now, and when you see the dot 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 going continuously, it's just like, okay, like what's going on? Are they writing like a full story? Are they
Right.
going back editing? Like,
It's never good to look at the dots. If you see the dots, you just got to close the app and do anything else,
now
because
that's
you can't
hard because
control
they're
what
gonna
the.
focus on the dots. They're gonna focus on the last thing that they remember is all those dots.
Yeah, yeah. And this even extends to you know choosing your own reality is really important. Uh, something a lot of people struggle with is rebounding from awkward moments. And so
Yeah.
the more interactions you have, like if you're trying to improve your communication skills, your people skills, you're going to, if you want to improve quickly, you're going to have more interactions. If you're in more interactions, guess what? Your total number of, we'll call them awkward moments, that number is going to increase. The overall percentage might go down because your skills improve. And so your percentage is probably going to go down. But the raw number is probably going to increase a little bit. And that's okay. In my opinion,
Oh, yeah.
that's the tuition. That's reality. That's the tuition that you're going to pay to improve. What most people do is an awkward moment happens. They kind of replay that awkward moment in their mind over and over and over, like it's the old VHS tape that they rewind to a certain point, and then they replay. And right at the most uncomfortable part, they kind of turn it off because it's just too uncomfortable, right? Um, Most people don't take the extra steps. Something I talk about in the book is I call it the 3 Fs, where when you flush, fix, and forget, the flushing part is getting a little emotional distance from you and that event. One of my favorite ways to do this is simply, it's kind of a cheat code where you view a third person doing that awkward thing that you did or that thing that you perceive as awkward. Uh, and that immediately is starting to trigger some, I'll call it the benefit of the doubt that you maybe won't extend to yourself, that you'll extend to other people very easily. And so you're immediately like, oh, well, okay, maybe that wasn't so bad. And then you ask yourself, well, is there anything about this situation that I would fix if I'm in a similar situation in the future? Maybe so, maybe not. Both answers are fine. But you've actually processed it at that point so that you can forget it or even forgive yourself, so that you can move on, right? Because that's the point, is to process it and move on. And then if the next time something happens, you can run the 3 Fs again, or maybe this particularly sticky event comes up again and again. Well, each time it does, the volume gets turned down and down and down. And this frees you up to try more and practice more, which is how you improve. Because the more interactions you have, any one interaction is not going to be that big a deal, because it's going to kind of get drowned out in the sea of interactions that you'll have over the course of, say, a year.
Yeah. Completely agree with all of that, especially kind of go back to your earlier point, creating that emotional distance from it. That flushing, because so many people just hold on to it and they feel so attached to it. It's like almost like you have to do some form of a healthy way that's helpful, that detachment, so you're not too close to it,
Hmm.
especially when it's with involving you and it's so personal. Because
Yeah.
the biggest thing that people want to do is they just want to be liked and appreciated for who they are. At the bottom line, when you talk to anybody, they just want to be seen, heard, and cared for.
Yeah. And our biggest sort of hurdle, at least mentally, is I worry about what other people think of me.
Exactly.
And the reality is like, people aren't thinking about you nearly as much as you might hope or you might fear, as the case may be. And so um, there's something I teach that I think is helpful. I call it the movie poster reframe, where if you're outside a movie theater and you walk past a section of posters, you see your poster first, and obviously you're the biggest head on that movie poster. Maybe your wife or your husband is like the next biggest head, and then maybe kids down here, maybe friends, maybe even coworkers in the little tiny text at the bottom. Okay, that's your movie poster. You walk a little further, you see your spouse's movie poster. Guess what? They're the biggest head. You're now the second biggest head. And then you keep going down. Your friends, maybe you're a head at the bottom. Your coworkers, you might not be on there at all, but if you are, you might be at the text at the very bottom potentially. And then you get to someone's movie poster of anyone that's ever met you. In almost all cases, you're not even on their movie poster, but that's okay because they're not on your movie poster either. Uh, and so I like that reframe, just from the perspective of the 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 root problem, in my opinion, of I care a lot about what other people think of me, is some kind of imbalance where you view them as up here and you're down here. Well, if you view it more as we're all just human, then great. It is a level playing field. Sure, you might interact with VIPs and people that, have a lot of success under their belt and whatnot. But even in those moments, if you can internalize the frame of they're a person, I'm a person, that is going to be more conducive to you speaking up, treating them just like a normal person, which is probably going to be more helpful than, you know, being stilted or being afraid to talk to them or trying to impress them, which could even be a problem. And so the more level the playing field is in your mind, I think that's a precursor to all the good unlocks that are further downstream.
Yeah, it reduces that suffering with that comparison to each other and everything. And we see when people try to do that a lot. You know, you could have someone who has millions of followers, and they'll say, "Well, this person has double the million." So if you have 5, they have 10. I mean, I remember there was an interview with I don't remember the football player's name, but he was basically being compared to Kelvin Johnson.
Hmm.
Kelvin Johnson, for those who don't know, was a wide receiver for the Lions, one of the most talented players. And so his player was about the same height, same wingspan, and then the person in the news reporter said, "Well, why don't you like him? Why can't you catch the ball like him?" And it's like, you have the same height, you're, let's say, 6'5", got a big wingspan and everything. Why can't you do that? So it's also like when people, and I see parents do this a lot of times too, when they kind of compare kids to kids. So kind of growing up, we're always taught about this comparison versus
Hmm.
understanding the reason why. So in that football player's case, is because Calvin Johnson apparently had these really long fingers. So you could
Hmm.
easily catch the ball compared to this guy who had maybe like solid hands, but not like long, thin fingers.
That's
And
interesting. It would come down to something that small.
something that small that can make such a big difference. And with that, instead of being like celebrated, it's like, well, basically, like, what's wrong with you? Like, why can't you be more social? Why can't you be more talkative? Or, you have a speech impediment and you didn't. Like, what happened to you? Like, there's like always like we always go to the negative versus appreciating, like you said, instead of appreciating the person for just being who they are, being that person.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things about my business is that there can be a lot of shame or guilt around improving your communication skills because there's a thought of, hey, shouldn't I already know this?
Yes.
Well, we learn things when we learn them. There's no right or wrong way. Obviously, it's probably better for our life path if we learn it earlier,
Hmm.
but sometimes that just doesn't happen for whatever reason. That's okay. Like I've had clients anywhere from their early 20s to their early 60s. We learn things when we learn them. And I think what's kind of been interesting with the book, because number one, I know that people struggle with this because they tell me that they do. They may not tell other people, but they tell me. So I have kind of inside baseball knowledge. Um, but what I'm kind of finding through some of the reviews and stuff is that even people that I think my hunch, at least we'll see if this proves out, there's more people who feel that kind of shame or guilt that are probably going to come out of the woodwork and say, "Hey, this book really helped me." Um, but I've never told anyone that I struggle with this because the reality is I've talked to very confident people and they have moments where they don't feel confident. Like the most confident people you could ever imagine, CEOs of companies and stuff like that, and they'll look over at you in a meeting like, "Am I doing okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay, you're doing fine." Because we all have that. Because why? Because we're all human. I think this is a condition of the human experience. I think what separates the really confident people, at least my hunch, is that um, they've been in so many interactions, and so they understand the kind of the rough range of
Hmm.
potential outcomes. And so there always could be outlier outcomes, right? Where something surprises you, but the odds of that happening get lower and lower the more interactions you're in. And so I think what ends up happening is that number one, they develop a kind of a faith and calm in their own skill set. And they understand that, like, okay, I've probably seen the vast majority of potential outcomes in a situation like this. And so I know what's on the other side of starting this conversation or doing this thing or whatever happens to be. Uh, and so that ends up translating to a lot of self-confidence just because you've been there, right? That receiver probably doesn't feel nervous when he's 35 years old and he's catching like, his 10,000th ball, right? Probably doesn't feel nervous at all, but the person who it's their first game in the NFL and they've never been in a stadium that big or something like that, like that's going to be different, right? Even though they probably have a lot of catches under the belt when you've been there before, there's uh there's no there's no shortcutting the reps part of an equation I talk about in the book, which is skills plus reps plus time. There's no shortcutting the reps part. It's just one of those things.
Well, that's what people need to recognize is that there's no shortcuts to life. You know, so many people are looking for that match still. All
Mhm.
these years later, despite thousands of research, despite thousands of articles, it's no judgment on people here, but people are still looking for that quick fix. Have you ever seen I believe it's the Minority Report, looking for that magic pill that takes away all emotions, that takes away all comparisons and everything, and you're just basically like a robot, basically a Terminator, and you're just going through life.
Yeah. The shortcut is time. Time is the magic bullet. Actually, you make me think. I actually in in the final chapter. Let's see if I have this. Oh yeah, I have 20 lessons that took me 20 years to learn, and lesson 19 is time is the magic bullet. If you put in consistent, high quality reps and you add time, then you will improve whether you want to or not.
Ooh,
And that's the secret. Like the
the
secret
last
is
part
time.
there. You improve. Can you say that last part again?
Yeah.
Just
Time is the magic bullet. If you put in consistent, high quality reps and you add time, then you will improve whether you want to or not.
see, that's key. You improve whether you want to or not by doing the work and putting it in. Like whether you recognize it or not, you're improving.
Yeah, and I did not mean this when I wrote it, but you actually just made me think. Uh, I've heard a version of this saying, so I'm not going to claim too much credit, but the improving whether you want to or not, I think that applies to anything you do and you spend time and attention on, right? It
Yeah.
could be something that's not helpful. You're going to improve that skill
Hmm.
of berating yourself whether you want to or not because you're devoting time and reps to it, right? And so you have to be really careful about where you're putting your time and your attention because you're going to improve the skill. That could be a bad skill, could be a good skill. You're going to improve that skill because you're devoting time and attention to it.
That is incredibly powerful. I don't think I've ever heard someone describe it that way.
Yeah, I think James Clear has some version of he's a big habits guy, Atomic Habits. Um, he has a version of that relating to habits, I think. But I think it applies for our purposes too. And so, uh, minimize the unhelpful things and try to maximize the helpful things, or maximize um, the things that are going to get you closer to where you ultimately want to be. And the beautiful part about communication skills is that it's a force multiplier for every other skill that you have. If you're already technically competent, if you add good communication skills, great communication skills to that, guess what? life is going to be life is going to be so much easier for you. Doors that you didn't know existed are going to open for you. Um, it's just it is a huge boost to someone who's already competent in their field.
Yeah, there's so much truth in what you just said in like the last like couple of minutes with everything. I mean, what you've been saying has been true all along. I don't want to discredit anything I just said, but just I think that just hits home about how you can communicate. Like you can see something and read it 1,000 different ways and still communicate it a million different ways until to kind of wake up someone from that slumber, to wake up someone to hear where it's like, wow, if I keep talking negatively to myself, whether I mean to or not, I'm gonna improve that horrible skill that's gonna keep me self-deprecating and keep me down. I
Yeah.
know Bruce Lee even has a quote that don't talk anything negative about yourself because you believe it. Like you're gonna believe it. The
Yep.
body's gonna remember it. And so whenever
Yep.
you are in that situation, the body's gonna be like, see, you shouldn't talk out loud because everyone looks at you like you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Or They're gonna say,
Yeah.
"See, you're right. It didn't fit the conversation at all. You were off-putting," versus someone's just like, "Oh, okay."
Yes. It's funny you bring this up. I just saw a post from his name is Doc Hypnosis on X. I've run I've he's been on a couple of the spaces that I posted. Good guy. And he had a post, I'll paraphrase. It's something along the lines of, if you use words like I am so tired, or I am insert less than helpful thing, you're hypnotizing yourself. And I'll add on to that, because I think you brought up a really good point, which is, if you if you're saying that sort of slogan to yourself, that catchphrase of I am so this, I am so that, what it's also doing, and I think Doc would agree with this, it's setting yourself up for confirmation bias. And so when you see it, when you see something that you do later on, it is extremely likely that you will ascribe this catchphrase to this action that you take later on, and then you'll treat it as proof. You're like, oh, well, look at that. I'm obviously awkward because I wouldn't have done that, and it's the whole vicious inner cycle. And that's why upgrading your mental OS is the very first thing I talk about in the book, because it's, to be fair, most people have been living a certain way uh, for years, if not decades, right? And so you have to overcome that programming to sort of clear the runway so that you can take off and get to where you want to go.
I would agree. I mean, I don't think there's anyone who really doesn't wanna improve.
Yeah, I think from being in this, I guess, industry for the last however many years, everyone wants to improve. The next level is people that decide to improve. Wanting versus deciding, and this isn't my thought. This is Scott Adams is the first person I heard talking about wanting versus deciding. If you want something like, oh yeah, I wanna gain weight, I want to gain some muscle, I want to lose weight, I want to do this, I want to do that. Everyone has wants. But when you decide that something is going to happen, then you will move heaven and earth. You'll crawl through broken glass, uh, and what it really means in my mind is you'll pay the tuition. And I think what a lot of people find out is that the tuition in their mind is probably worse than it is in reality in many cases, where they're like, oh, it's going to be terrible. Um, like a few years ago, I started lifting because I'd always been very slender, and I wanted to gain some muscle. And in my mind, I thought, oh, it's going to be terrible. Like, this entire process is not going to be fun. But I started doing it, and I was like, oh, well, once you get in the routine, and this is also something I talk about in the book, I call it effort gravity, where the more you do something, the easier it gets. And so once you establish that routine of eating what you need to eat and lifting what you need to lift and all that stuff, it becomes easier the more you do it. And so it really isn't that bad. So the suffering that you imagine versus the suffering that it actually is, in
Mhm.
my opinion, it's usually different. It's usually not necessarily worse than you imagine. Because I think we're really good at creating monsters in our mind that are probably a little bit worse than reality.
Well, you definitely have the language for it, and you definitely can really explain things really well for people to understand. I mean, I think it's a big gift that you have,
I appreciate that.
and probably even a bigger
I
heart to help people who are struggling because you have that experience what it's like to struggle.
Yeah, yeah. You have to have some credibility if you're gonna help people and show them a path forward. They have to know that you were once where they are. Um, and I think in my opinion, when you combine your own um, sort of struggle with how not only how I got out, but how all my clients got out too. Because I'm a big believer in if it worked for you, great, but you could be a special case. Like, there's always a chance, right, that you're just a special case. Uh, if you've helped a bunch of other people do the same, okay, well, whatever system you've designed probably works pretty well, because it not only worked for you, but it worked for other people as well. And that to me is even a bigger indicator of, like, oh, okay, this is worth looking at.
Completely agree. And so as we wrap up today, what would you want to leave someone today?
Yeah, I think the the thought that I would like to leave people with is you don't need to be socially fearless. You need to act to dissipate the fear of being social. That's lesson 20 of 20 in the 20 lessons that took me 20 years to learn. We have to act. Like there's a phrase going around right now called "you can just do things," which is pretty popular, and I think it's a good phrase. Um, you can just change things. Like you can just change things if you um, it could be that you want to improve your communication skills. It could be that you're already doing pretty good, but you just want the next edge, which is completely valid. Like you can just tweak things, you can just change things, and you can improve. And it'll happen probably faster than you expect. It will take work and it will take effort. But the great part is you get to benefit from it for the rest of your life, and that's the cool thing, in my opinion.
By taking steps, it will benefit you for the rest of your life. Whether you recognize it or not, you'll get a little bit better.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
document it, pay attention to it. So Jeff, thank you so much for taking time today to come on this podcast. And so for
Yeah,
anyone watching this, go check Jeff out. All his socials, his businesses, his websites, anything that he has will be in the description below. And that does mean including his book. So go support him.
yeah. You can go to becomemorecompelling.com/book, and you can read the first chapter of Confidence Maxing. And if you like it, then you can go and grab it on Amazon, either paperback or Kindle. The audio, I'm an audiobook person. The audiobook is in review right now by Audible, and it should be out probably in the next week or so if all things go well. So there is an audiobook version, and let me tell you, it sounds fantastic.
I bet you have a great voice.
Well, I actually hired a narrator, and he did even better than I could. And so, shout out to Lyle Blaker. Fantastic, fantastic guy.
So if you want, so that means you got to stay in tuned about an audiobook. So that way, if you want to be in your car, you want to be on the bus, you want to be wherever you are, doing a little jog, and you want to listen to them, then you got to wait for a few weeks then. So don't worry. Hopefully, it'll get approved by Audible. So that way, your message will continue to impact those. And with this podcast, we'd like to do a call of action. So the call of action is, what is one step that you'll do today to be more confident socially? The key word is socially. Are you going to go out there and talk to somebody? So you better let Jeff and myself know in the comments below, though, what are you going to do to be more social? To increase that confidence to the max level. And if you have value out of this, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this message to someone who needs some encouraging. We also have the Men's Lifeline Academy Discord group that meets Monday at 7:30 p.m. EST, where we discuss lessons, life, and we always about helping and supporting each other. So, Jeff, thank you, my friend, for coming on the podcast. I just loved talking with you today, getting to know you just a little bit more, and look forward to many more connections with you, my friend.
I appreciate it, Zach. Thank you for having me.